Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our third parent forum regarding the reopening of the Troy School District. Before I start tonight, I want to thank our Director of Technology, Erin Shevers, and her whole department for all the work they've done helping us get ready for the reopening of schools. As you know, technology is going to play a major role in our new way of life, and Erin Shevers and her department have been outstanding getting us ready. And not only getting us ready for the reopening of schools, but helping us put forums like this together, both with the parents and the employees. So thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight. Again, our third parent forum. I said last week, we are trying hard to be transparent and have an open and active and ongoing communication. Dr. Watson in her presentation last week talked about how important communication is going to be this year. It's going to be more critical than ever, that the communication between home and school is, again, ongoing and effective. So please keep asking questions, and we will keep doing our best to give you the answers. People want to know when they're going to know their schedules, when they're going to know their teachers, when they're going to know their transportation, and we're working on all of those things. The answers to those questions are obviously later this year than they have been in previous summers, and part of that is because we're still waiting for some of the parents to fill out the form. So thank you to all the parents who have already filled it out. We're over 3,400 responses, 3,400 responses, and we appreciate everybody that's done it. But that means there's still several hundred left that we have to have. We can't make any of those decisions until we get those final numbers. So again, please, if you haven't filled it out, please do so as soon as possible. If you know someone who hasn't filled it out, please let them know that we need them to do it as soon as possible. Again, there's a lot of work that still has to be done once those numbers are set. So we're going to leave the link open until Monday at noon, but the sooner you can get in there and fill that out, the better. As of right now, with those 3,400 or so responses, the majority of our families have chosen in-person instruction. We're about 60% for in-person and about 40% district-wide that have chosen remote. That number varies by school and by elementary and secondary, but for the most part, it fluctuates in that range. Some also have asked if they're going to get a confirmation of what choice they made, and the answer to that is yes. Again, we got to wait till everything is finalized, but at some point in the next couple of weeks, we're shooting for the first week in September, you will get a notification that says your son or daughter is scheduled for in-person instruction without transportation or something like that. Whatever you've chosen, you will get a confirmation back. Again, we're hoping for the first week in September. Two quick updates that you may already know by now. One is the school calendar was officially adopted last night with the changes for the 4 professional development days to be at the beginning of the year. So students will officially start on Monday, September 14th. As I said last time, that'll give all the staff and faculty and administration a chance to really get ready so that we can hit the ground running for that Monday the 14th. And also a follow-up on building start times. In our first parent forum, I discussed that we may have to stagger some start times because of transportation issues. As of right now, and again, we're not done with that data until everyone fills out the form, but as of right now, it looks like we're going to be able to manage with the transportation with those that have asked for it now. So again, it could change, but for now, all start times for the buildings should be the same as they've always been. Tonight we have 2 main focuses. Foci? How do you say that? Okay. One is about ventilation. We've had a lot of questions about ventilation, especially in some of our old buildings. And that'll be for Mr. Hotaling. And the second will be special education. So we've had some specific questions about our students with disability population and students that require a little bit more support. So it's understandable that we're getting questions on those. And so we will have those 2 areas of focus tonight. So I will start with Mr. Hotaling.
Thank you, Mr. Carmello. As Mr. Carmello stated, we've had a lot of questions through the email or phone calls regarding building ventilation. In my first slide, we'll just go over some information from the state reopening, the status in our schools, and what our plan is going forward. Building ventilation has been a hot topic, not just for schools, but for businesses. It's even been discussed by the governor's office. Those paying attention on some of his determinations, malls, gyms, which were now recently given more guidance, are required to upgrade certain ventilating systems, air ventilation. Schools do not have those same requirements as malls and gyms. I can't answer why, but they do not have the same requirement. Just as recent as yesterday in the Times-Union, there was a story about school reopening, focusing on Guilderland School District. They spent a lot of time in that article talking about their ventilation system, concerns of parents, and what the plan is for them going forward. And really, Troy and all schools are in the same boat. As I mentioned, we have a lot of concerns. The New York State guidance breaks down ventilation into two categories. One is mechanical ventilation, and one is natural ventilation. Mechanical ventilation means there's an actual mechanical unit bringing in outside air into the building. We have that at School 2, School 12, School 14, Carroll Hill, the middle school, and the high school. The other category is natural ventilation. That is at School 16 and School 18, and really that means there is no mechanical unit, and the rooms receive their ventilation through opening windows and doors. Those are two of our older buildings and are grandfathered in without ventilation. Again, that's not uncommon around the state. Probably the reason why in the state reopening guidance, they're allowing for both of those systems to exist in school reopening. Many schools were built decades ago and are in that situation. It is important to note that in the last 2019 building project referendum, $56 million that was approved by the voters, we are upgrading both systems at 16 and 18 in the next few years to provide full mechanical ventilation. As I mentioned, both types are allowed in the New York State reopening guidance. All buildings will be open. For mechanical ventilation buildings, the plan is for all HVAC units to be running throughout the year. That means fresh air will be pulled in throughout the whole year, which we really do now, and we will continue to do so. We'll also follow all manufacturers' guidelines in terms of filter replacement, again, which we do now, and we will continue to do so. For those interior spaces, we've gotten some questions, especially from staff in offices that are interior that have no windows. There are fresh air vents in those spaces. We have been emailed and contacted by certain staff members, and we will investigate any space if you feel that that's not the case. But those are receiving fresh air from usually roof air handlers for fresh air into those spaces. For the natural ventilation plan, that's against buildings 16 and 18. As we mentioned before, teachers and staff will be instructed to keep windows and interior doors. I know there was a concern about exterior doors being open, interior doors open for as long as possible and as often as possible to introduce fresh air into those environments. That has been the big concern, I'd say, in terms of our communications with parents and staff. The district has decided in this past week, out of an abundance of caution, to purchase standalone medical grade air purifiers for all offices and classrooms in schools 16 and 18. We feel that that's the right thing to do. It's going to provide the safest possible environment for our students and staff, and those will be in place for the start of school. I do just want to mention, as I mentioned at some of our staff meetings, and I believe at our panel, 2 panels ago, that ventilation, I don't want to discount it, it's important, but I do always say that it's one tool in stopping the spread of COVID, and social distancing, masks, and washing hands are the first line of defense. We do take the ventilation seriously, and hopefully this will be a great plan for staff and students.
So thank you very much, Mr. Hotaling. I just want to follow up. So last week we talked about these HEPA air filter purifiers, and we said we purchased 20 of them to use in some of the interior rooms at 16 and 18. Since then, we've actually had offers to buy some for the rest of the building and things like that. So when Mr. Hotaling's talking about this week, we decided, so we have those original 20 we ordered, and then now we've ordered ones for all rooms and offices in those buildings. So thank you very much, Mr. Hotaling. Now for our special ed section, Dr. Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Carmello. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge and thank Mrs. Donna Fitzgerald, the district's Director of Pupil Personnel Services, and Dr. Amy Prabhakaran, the district's Assistant Director for Pupil Personnel Services, for their contributions to the development of these slides. I also want to share that they will be recording and sending out a video next Tuesday, August 25th, with even more information related to special education and the reopening of schools. But what we've done tonight is to take the most frequently asked questions and put them into categories. And so the format for the next few slides will be questions and answers. So the first question has to do with self-contained program services. And the question is, if my child attends a self-contained class, will he or she come to school in person every day? And the answer to that is yes, that all students receiving instruction in a self-contained classroom do have the option to attend school in person 5 days per week in their home school. The only way that they would not be doing that is if they were choosing remote-only learning. In addition to our youngest learners and our English language learners, the district has really prioritized the provision of daily instruction to all students with disabilities participating in self-contained classes. So as you remember at the last forum, we talked a lot about the guidance document from the New York State Education Department. And in that document, it did direct us, and we agree and believe in it wholeheartedly, that we should be prioritizing our youngest students, our elementary students with daily instruction, our English language learners with daily instruction, and also our students with disabilities in self-contained classrooms. So the answer to that is yes. Next question, if my child receives special education teacher support in a regular education classroom, will he or she still receive those services? And the answer to that is yes. At the elementary level, special education consultant teachers will continue to provide push-in support to students in general education classrooms. At the secondary level, remember at the secondary level, the in-person model is 2 days on and 2 days remote. Special education teachers will provide push-in support to students on their in-person days, as well as check-in times on their virtual days. So consultant teachers will be joining virtual general education classes. And so some of the consultant teacher support will be in the form of a check-in on those virtual days. And some of you may have questions as I'm going through these answers. The special education forum next week will go more deeply into this. And at the very end, I'm going to share names, positions, and phone numbers and emails so that if you have if this creates any other questions for you, that we'll make sure we get those answered. One of the statements that you're going to see on many of the slides is, to the greatest extent possible, services will be delivered as written in the IEP. It's important for everyone to remember that when we did our annual reviews in the spring, we were planning for in-person learning in the fall. And so that is the case for some students, but not all. And it's not the case every day at the secondary level. And so we will, to the greatest extent possible, honor what's written in that IEP. But if a student has, for example, 3 sessions of support, 60 minutes a week in a particular class that isn't running for 60 minutes, we're going to have to necessitate a change to that IEP. But special education teachers will be working with every student and every family to assure that modifications and accommodations are provided. And so wherever we can, we're going to deliver and honor that IEP service exactly as it's written on the IEP. And where we can't, we will work very closely with families to come to agreement on how it will be delivered. Next question, how will the district provide related services like occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, and/or counseling to my child? Again, to the greatest extent possible, services will be delivered as written in the IEP. Students will be provided with related services, which can include a combination of people pushing into the room, students being pulled out for support. They might have individual sessions, group sessions, depending on scheduling for both the in-person and remote-only learners. So I think I used the example at the last forum that if I'm a student who receives occupational therapy, and it's because I have some challenges with regard to writing, some of the occupational therapy might be delivered during my writing class in the room. There may also be instances where the occupational therapist needs to do some one-on-one or small group therapy, and that might be in a pull-out situation as long as space allows. Our therapists will work with families who have chosen the remote-only learning option to really determine the delivery method that works best for each student within the scheduled day. So some students might find, if they're in a remote learning model, that they are having some therapy during lunch, during an access period at the end of the day, during a push-in of a content area. But again, the therapist will work very closely with every family to figure out the delivery method that works best. Next question has to do with out-of-district special education programs. How will special education services be provided to my child if they attend an out-of-district program? All students participating in an out-of-district program will be contacted by the individual program to inform you of the options for in-person or remote-only instruction. So for example, if your child attends Wildwood School, the district will honor that IEP and will honor that program. Wildwood School would then be reaching out to the families to let you know if there are different options in terms of their program being in-person or remote. In every case, any Troy City School District students participating in an out-of-district program in person will absolutely continue to receive district transportation as needed. And we would follow those social distancing and safety protocols that were established on all of our buses. Next question, my child receives resource room 5 days a week and speech therapy 3 times a week. Will he go to another room for his services, or will they do the service in the same room that he is in for class? Again, not to sound like a broken record, to the greatest extent possible, services will be delivered as written in the IEP. So if the IEP says that those services are happening in the classroom, that's where they'll happen. If it says they're happening in a pull-out room down the hall, if that room is available, that would still happen, or we may need to get creative with a space, in the classroom set off to the side. But to the greatest extent possible, in this particular case, this child has resource room and speech, and they would still be receiving resource room and speech. Depending on students' needs and classroom schedules, there may be a need to utilize a combination of both push-in and pull-out therapy in a separate room, as we indicated before. So it might be written on the IEP as exclusively push in or exclusively pull out, and we might need to use a combination. But again, any change like that would be a discussion between the special education providers and every single family. If my child is transported to school on a minibus, will this continue in September? The answer is yes. Students who are approved for special transportation on their IEP will continue to be transported in that way. Social distancing and masks will be required for all individuals on the bus, and the buses will be thoroughly cleaned and disinfected between routes, which is the same as the every busing situation in Troy. So again, those IEPs were written in annual reviews in the spring, and unless the needs of the student have changed, and that special transportation would still be in place. Special ed services for remote-only learners. We did have some questions about this. The question here is, if I've chosen remote-only instruction for my child, how will his or her IEP services be provided? So these would be students learning in the home setting on a completely remote model. And again, to the greatest extent possible, services will be delivered as written in the IEP. Some services may look different given the remote-only learning schedule, and I mentioned that in a previous slide. And IEP services will be provided in a variety of formats, including Google Meet, Seesaw, recorded sessions, and office hours, depending on the elementary and secondary levels. So you may remember from our remote learning forum that we held last week, we talked about a variety of platforms that teachers and therapists and counselors will be using to deliver services to our students. And so really all of the special education services will be using those same formats. So Google Meet is an opportunity for them to do some, whole group kinds of things. They could even do one-on-one types of meetings. Seesaw is the elementary interactive platform, and then recorded sessions. There may be times where the physical therapist has recorded himself or herself and is sharing that recording for students, and then joining in a Google Meet and referring to that video. And then obviously we are always available with office hours and anytime families need to have a scheduled conference as well. Switching gears to IEP services and technology challenges. If my high school child has an IEP and we don't have a stable internet connection, how will his or her services be provided? And this is a great question, and I'm really proud to say that Ms. Shevers and her team have been working diligently to tackle every challenge that has come up. So we have far fewer challenges now than we had in the springtime when we were sort of forced into this format really quickly. The district is still exploring ways to support families who do not have a reliable internet connection in the home. We will ensure, and we do promise you, that every single student will be able to engage fully in remote learning. And we have a variety of solutions that we are that we already have and that we are continuing to add to, and those will be arranged on a case-by-case basis. But we will make sure that every single student is able to fully engage in remote learning.
Can I add something?
Yeah, of course.
I just want to add to that one. That's where the communication comes in. So if you know that you're a family that struggled in the spring with your internet connection or anticipate struggling in the fall, please contact us or contact your building so that we can do what Dr. Watson's talking about.
And that's a nice segue into the last bullet on this slide, that we did have students who had an internet connection, but it would often be disrupted. And so we did try to work with families, but in the meantime, we also have some other tricks up our sleeve. And teachers are able really to download materials onto a student's Chromebook so that they actually can work on those materials without an internet connection. And we have other solutions as well. So I want to put aside your fears. If you are a parent of a child with an IEP who has chosen remote learning, we will work with you to make sure that your student can fully participate. Sticking with remote learning for all, if the district is forced to close schools and pivot to remote learning for all students, will my child receive teletherapy for speech and occupational therapy? So this, I believe, would have been a parent of a person who chose in-person instruction and would be getting speech and OT in the regular, setting. The answer to this question is yes. If the district was forced to close school, as we were in the spring, and if we have to move to a remote learning model for all students, teletherapy sessions, those delivered remotely, would be provided to the greatest extent possible in accordance with each student's IEP, just as they were in the spring. So we were still able to deliver occupational therapy, physical therapy, counseling, speech therapy, and it was all done in a teletherapy model, meaning that students were doing it virtually, whether it was in a Google Meet or through Seesaw, and that would continue. So we assure you that those services would continue if we were forced to have a mandated school closure. We're hoping that doesn't happen this year. Special education teachers and therapist assignments. Mr. Carmello spoke to this in his opening remarks, that we are getting questions from families of general education students and special education students. When will I know my child's teacher or therapist? When will I know who that's going to be? And what will the schedule be for the delivery of my child's therapy? So families will receive notification of teachers, therapists, and schedules of services later this year than ever before. So we would just ask for your patience. As with so much of this work, it depends on the final numbers. And I know that's frustrating for people to hear, but we are getting closer to finalizing those numbers. And once we do finalize them, we will then be able to move forward with teacher assignments, assigning special education teachers as case managers, assigning therapists, and then those folks would be reaching out to families to really get that schedule finalized. So if you could give us a little bit more patience, another couple of weeks, we will have that done. But you have not heard that yet. And so some families were saying, did I miss something? No, you did not miss anything. They haven't been done yet. The district's continuing to collect information. And as I said, all of the assignments are based on that. And you can expect phone calls from your providers once that's done. And then finally, the last two slides for this section really speak to social, emotional, developmental health and well-being of our students and families. And this is a district priority in Troy, and we have very dedicated teams to this. We have a district social, emotional development and learning committee known as the CEDL committee, and that is a district level group that meets regularly. And they really work on making sure that the district is meeting the social emotional needs of students and families. And I would say we also have very active building level teams. Almost every one of our schools, actually every one of our schools, not almost, every one of our schools has a full student support team. And that would include a counselor, a social worker, a psychologist, teachers, and a variety of other, usually the principal, the assistant principal or principal assistant is often on that team, as well as some other related service people. And the goal of that team is really to monitor the social, emotional, and behavioral needs of students and families. And so I think the work of these groups at the district and building level is more important this year than ever before. And I think that additional district support during COVID-19, I think we feel as a district that our responsibility has been extended beyond students to really include family support, faculty and staff support. Really, everyone is going through a challenging time, and we recognize our responsibility is crucial in helping everybody to have the services that they need. And I can tell you that our teams have been very busy this summer, doing outreach to families, working with families to help meet whatever their needs happen to be, doing some home visits for support. And we also have an employee assistance program, which I'm mentioning because that is a tool that we've made available to our leaders, faculty, and staff. We realize that a lot of people are having a really hard time right now, and helping to meet everybody's social emotional needs is critical. The New York State guidance document that we talked about 2 forums ago, when we started really talking about reopening and what that was going to look like in Troy, it establishes social emotional learning as a primary focus for our work with students at the elementary and secondary level. And so what the State Education Department has asked us to do, which I believe we would do in Troy anyway, whether or not we were asked to do it, is to really begin the year with focus and support for those social emotional needs of students. And so before getting to academics, really just trying to gauge where students are social emotionally and how we can best support them. Our reopening plan also includes training. Mr. Carmello mentioned that those opening days will now be used as conference days, and part of that time will include a variety of mandated trainings that we are required to do, but we will be adding extensive training this year for leaders, for faculty and staff on gauging the social emotional needs of our students and also responding to them to make sure that we are meeting their needs, families, and the adults who serve them. So it's a big emphasis this year, and don't be surprised if your children come home and they're talking about some of the social emotional discussions that they're having in class. I hope they do. And then finally, as the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum, I can't bear to end without talking about curriculum and instruction and assessment as it relates to social emotional learning. And I'm really proud to share that the things on this page are not new. And so this isn't because of COVID, now we're going to start talking about social emotional developmental health and learning. These are things that the district has been committed to. This is my 8th year in Troy, and we've been working extensively in these areas every year. And so I'm really proud of the work that our teams have done at the district level and in each of the buildings. We utilize a research-based core program to teach explicit social emotional skills. So for example, some of the lessons that we would be doing with students would be what to do when I'm feeling anxious, which might be feeling right now, how to handle anger or frustration, what to do when I'm having a conflict with myself or someone else. And so there's role playing, and there's a real common language in our program that we use to try to build the capacity of every student to know how to have strategies to deal with some of these feelings. Our program is called Second Step. There will be a link to it at the end if you are interested in learning more about it. And it is used at the elementary and middle levels, and it directly supports our students in the development of healthy strategies for responding to stressful or challenging situations and events. And honestly, I think this might be the most stressful, challenging situation or event many of us have experienced in a long time. And so these are strategies that can help our students and also all of the adults as well. This curriculum is delivered at the elementary and middle level, and there are a number of other explicit strategies that are taught at the high school as well. And some of this learning happens in morning meetings. So as students are coming to school at the elementary level, they often start with a morning meeting on the rug. Our virtual students will be starting in the same way. We've scheduled a block of time at the beginning of the day for a morning meeting, and it's a great chance to build community, but it also allows us to begin with some explicit teaching of this social emotional curriculum. It happens in restorative circles, happens in health class, individual and small group counseling sessions. Those are just a few examples of where we would be teaching this curriculum. And the instruction is provided by a number of people. So counselors, social workers, psychologists, student support team members, and teachers are all playing a role. And I know many of the schools have assemblies where they expand on some of the social emotional learning as a whole school. So it's really exciting. And then finally, the assessment piece. Again, these assessments are not new to Troy. These are assessments that, well, one is new, but the major one is not new. It's an assessment that we've been using for the last few years. We will be providing training to faculty and staff on how to administer the social, academic, and emotional behavior risk screener, also known as SABERS. And we'll include a link to that. Ms. Shevers will add a link to that and the other Second Step resource I spoke about to the ongoing list of resources that we have for families online. And then, so that is a research-based screener that helps us to identify students who are at risk in any of those areas. And it's something that the district has always administered. In addition to that, Mrs. Fitzgerald and Dr. Prabhakaran have developed a reopening narrative assessment in order to identify students who might need more support and in order to make sure that some tiered interventions are in place for students who need them. And honestly, that narrative assessment is going to really be just talking with kids. How are you doing? How was your summer? Did you have any struggles? What's going well for you? How are you feeling? Really, one of the things that we always talk about in Troy is how important and critical it is to build relationships with students. And I think we understand that intimately, those of us who are working here, and we understand how crucial it is to student success and to the success of our efforts, whatever our role happens to be, whether we're a teacher, whether we're a leader. It really is all about relationships. And I think while we do have a lot of district assessments and a lot of formal things, this is going to be a year that begins with people looking at each other and saying, how are you? How's it going? What do you need right now? And I think at the elementary level, you know, we'll be guiding students through that a little bit more delicately. You know, school will feel different to them this year, and talking with them about, you know, what feels the same, what feels different, and really it's going to be about conversations, it's going to be about relationships. But what I would hope to leave you with is that the district is very committed to this work. It's not new work to the district, but it's work that has probably never been more important than it is this year. And so with that, I'll go to the last slide, which is the special education contact slide. Mrs. Fitzgerald did establish a special education email, specialed@troycsd.org, and she is responding to those questions as quickly as they come in. She's doing a great job keeping up on all of that. But if you want to speak with someone, if you have questions, if you have concerns, if you just want to talk about, you know, the prospective program for your son or daughter, feel free to call any of these people, and they're listed here. Mrs. Fitzgerald is our Director of Pupil Services. Dr. Prabhakaran is our Assistant Director of Pupil Services. Karen Driscoll is our Preschool and Out-of-District CSE Chairperson. If you are at the elementary level, you probably want to reach out to Carrie Klinowski, who is our Elementary Chair. Troy Middle School, the ALP at School 12, Charter School, and privates. Those meetings are chaired by Kristen Leiden. At Troy High School, you would be reaching out to Colleen Surratt, who is the high school CSE chair. And then any BOCES program, whether it's Questar BOCES, Cap Region BOCES, anything that has to do with BOCES, you would reach out to Holly Toteno. And you can see I've listed everyone's name, their corresponding direct email, and their direct phone number. So feel free to use that special education, you know, general email. You will get a response. They're responding to every single email. Or if you'd like to have a phone conversation or a more specific communication, feel free to reach out to any of those folks as needed. You want to do the last slide?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive review of the special ed. And a lot of it pertains to all students as well. So thank you very much. We always finish with weekend. We will end a story. We talked last week about how that's more important than ever, that we all have to work together. Please remember, this is a fluid process. I said that the very first time that we were talking. The plan can and will change. We are trying as best as we can to be responsive to all the concerns that are coming in. I think the air purifiers is a perfect example of that. As information comes and guidance changes, then we change what we're planning on doing. There are still a lot of things that need to be worked out as far as details for the daily operations of the buildings, you know, those will happen in the next couple of weeks. We are planning tentatively right now to have another one of these forums, probably not next week, but the week after, when everything is kind of more in a final stage and some of those details have been worked out, so that we can give one last presentation before the school year starts. But please, if you haven't filled out the form, or if you know someone hasn't filled out the form, please spread the word, because we can't even begin to make those final decisions until we have everyone's choice about being in person or remote. So thank you very much to the presenters tonight. Thank you to Ms. Shevers, Director of Technology, for helping us put it together. And thank you all for listening. Really appreciate it.